And now to the other blockbuster news of the day. The Supreme Court reinstating key components of President Trump's travel order, imposing temporary travel restrictions from 6 Muslim-majority countries, making this a major victory for the Trump team. Joining me now, Tom Fitton. Tom, thanks for joining. Essentially, would you say that the Constitution won today and that activists, lawyers, judges rather, lost?
Oh, sure, they lost big time. The Constitution won, our national security won, and of course President Trump won, his policies won, and it was a massive vindication for him. Your viewers should know that essentially the travel ban's back in force, and there are exceptions. There are individual litigants, the court has said, you know, are not subject to the reinstatement, and they, you know, they might be able to get in, but virtually everyone else, the individuals in the 6 affected countries that are out of control in terms of terrorism and the inability to check who's coming in and out, those folks can't come in according to the Supreme Court. You know what was interesting, most interesting, is that the lower courts, the liberal anti-Trump activists on those lower courts who threw out the ban in its entirety, stopped the whole thing from moving forward, couldn't get one justice on the Supreme Court. Not Justice Sotomayor, not Justice Ginsburg, not Justice Kagan, not Justice Breyer, to agree with their widespread or massive injunction of the president's actions. Well,
Tom, then would you say that is this an opinion on whether or not this is a travel ban or a Muslim ban? Has that been adjudicated here, or do we have a hint on what they may decide in October?
Well, I don't think they would have lifted the initial stay that was so broad if they didn't think they were likely to rule in favor of the president. And I didn't see anything in today's ruling about the president's tweets or comments. So that silliness, at least for now, has been put aside by the court as they took seriously the president's prerogatives in the area of immigration law in terms of protecting and making the judgment to stop aliens who he thinks might be a risk from coming into the country, and the president's preeminence in just national security generally in terms of protecting the United States.
And today, of course, we heard from the president. One quote we had: today's unanimous Supreme Court decision is a clear victory for our national security. It allows a travel suspension for the 6 terror-prone countries and a refugee suspension to become largely effective. My #1 responsibility as Commander-in-Chief is to keep the American people safe. Today's ruling allows me to use an important tool for protecting our nation's homeland. Tom, let me ask you, because when I do the math, okay, 90-day moratorium, they hear this in October, it will be effectively expired by then. So how does that play into the ultimate decision here?
Well, it could be the facts are very different when the court hears this case, and I don't know when in October or when in the new term it's going to hear the case, so it could be even later than October. The president could have done the analysis, they could have done the security screening and the need and analyzed the need for more vetting and made additional decisions, either to keep people out or to allow them in under strict scrutiny and extreme vetting, as the president calls it. You know, frankly, if I were the president and the administration, I'd take this ruling as a ringing endorsement and think of other things they need to be doing that perhaps they weren't willing to do to protect our nation's security from the terrorist threat abroad.
Tom, stay right there. I want to bring in addition to the panel to discuss Jillian Melchior, Christopher Bedford, and Ford O Connell. Ford, you're an attorney. I know how you were rooting for this. It seems like a clear-cut victory for the Trump administration.
Well, I think it is a victory for President Donald Trump and also for national security. I think what's very, very interesting here is something that Justice Thomas got to, and that is going to be what constitutes a bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the United States. I think that is going to be very, very key, because as this opinion is written, I find it extremely unworkable, and it seems to me like John Roberts is practicing, how should we say, crisis management on the Supreme Court until we actually get to October. Big victory for Trump, but what I want to know is what's going to constitute that bona fide relationship, because if they lean in Trump's direction, this is going to be a major victory at a precedent-setting scope on the powers of the presidency and national security.
Yeah, Chris, to that point, Justice Thomas saying this opens up another can of legal worms and probably more legal court hearings. Nevertheless, though, it does feel like and really no one thought, I didn't hear any handicappers, legal handicappers, thinking that this would be this one-sided for President Trump.
I think he can definitely count as a victory. I'm guessing that bona fide relationship is going to count as a familial relationship or employment in the United States, something like that. And with the 90 days or possibly more that this is going to be in effect, Donald Trump basically wins the day. Also, if you're looking to have Donald Trump's order overturned, you got bad news from the courts, because the court said that you have to explain why the point won't be moot by the time they figure it out, and they may end up dismissing it anyways. So Donald Trump gets this win, and the Supreme Court essentially said that actually we're going to consider the law before we consider Donald Trump's tweets, which the lower courts really hadn't done. That's a victory. That's some deference to the executive. And to them, they're going to have now 90 days or more to get in line and figure out something that they're going to codify more soundly to protect this country with extreme vetting, most likely.
And of course, you know, we're talking even these lower courts take into account candidate Trump's tweets, not even President Trump's tweets or subsequent action since he's been inaugurated. Jillian, how do you see this whole thing playing out?
Well, so I've not been a big fan of the refugee ban or the travel ban as a whole, but I think this is still the right decision for democracy. We want branches of government checking each other's power, but we don't want them usurping power, and I think that's what we saw the other courts doing. So while I'm not a huge fan of this as a matter of policy, for the bigger democratic principle, I think this is the right call.
So, Tom, you talk about additional steps to keep terrorists out. If the Trump administration was emboldened as such, what do you have in mind here?
Maybe they need more time. Maybe they need to add to the list of countries. Maybe they need to take more significant action to further restrict refugee flows. I'm sure my guess is there was a menu of options they were considering that might be expanded after this resounding victory.
But, Tom, does this always have to be a temporary travel ban as the administration redetermines its policies on admission, or can this be like a lot of government programs that's reinstated or extended into forever?
You raise a good point. Maybe it's made permanent absent new developments, and that could be the result of the analysis after 90 days. You know, is the Sudan going to be any better in 90 days? Is Yemen going to be any better in 90 days?
Tom, you make a great point. I think with the 9-0, what we've learned here is when it comes to national security, foreign nationals do not have a right to travel to the United States. And I do think that we need to take more steps. But I think this is a huge ruling in terms of the scope of presidential power. Because, Charles, as you know, I've argued over and over that the idea of, well, maybe this isn't the greatest, way to combat terrorism. You have to understand, you have to try to do things and try to keep us safe, because that is the main job of the president, to protect the country and her citizens. I want to see more done, but I think this is a good step. We got a long way to go.
Chris, if it's expanded beyond these 6 countries, do you again get these activists who start to say, okay, we told you, this was just sort of a setup, and now we get the real ultimate goal of this?
I think you'll get a massive activist reaction. It's not going to be people who otherwise would have voted for Donald Trump, so I don't know exactly what the political cost for him would be. If you're willing to go out and hold these signs and block airports like his opponents have in the past, you're probably not going to change your mind based on his travel ban. But the question is whether or not, how soundly that's going to keep us safe. The idea is that the people who are terrorists often have the correct cards. It's the farmers and the people who are poor who don't always have the correct identification. The bad guys will be able to sneak in, but this is most likely a good first step, at least till they evaluate a way to keep Americans safer.